Welcome back to Let's Play Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. Last time we beat Phantoon, and today we're exploring the wrecked ship today because, yeah, there's a few things we have to grab before heading off to Maridia, or, you know, have to grab in accordance to what, any other casual gamer would expect, because I'm pretty sure if I was a speedrunner or something, I'd probably skip the gravity suit entirely, but I'm no speedrunner, at least not for Super Metroid anyway, and I'm actually quite pissed off because not only have I been flubbing my commentary a lot as of late, meaning I had to do numerous outtakes, it's been this reoccurring issue of me just not only having the momentum and confidence in just doing these commentaries as of late, also as of recent, I went to go back and try to record more of Super Metroid recently, and basically what had happened is that I took out Super Metroid and put in a different game because I wanted to stream something else. I wasn't in the mood for Metroid that night, and upon putting Super Metroid back into my SNES, basically what had happened was that I lost all of my save data, which, isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Because I had only made like 50 minutes worth of in-game progress, so it's not like I lost a whole lot. And plus, Super Metroid isn't a very long game to begin with. If this happened with Prime, however, that would be a different story. But yeah, basically, I had to kind of like commit myself to start the whole game over again, and that meant redoing segments like that sequence break back in Norfair and the early Super Missiles, and remembering which expansions I grabbed before going back to where I once was. It was kind of obnoxious, let's just put it that way. And I had to like find time to build momentum for that again before recording a video once more. And yeah, I love Super Metroid, but it's just like so many people have done it to death, and I'd like to say my 2 cents on it, but more often than not, I'd much rather just move on to the other Metroid games because, ironically, a big reason why I decided to do the Metroid series is that outside of Super Metroid, you don't really see many of the other games being Let's Played, especially like the Prime games, for example. And I definitely want to go and play each and every one of them for the channel. And there's also just been the whole notion of me wanting to add something else to the channel. I know this channel has been around for like 5 years now, which really isn't saying anything because I've been super off and on with the channel as of late. And aside from the thing I had mentioned in part 3 about Samus Returns, I'm thinking I'm gonna get to a point where, I'll still do Let's Plays, but it might just be pushed back a little bit farther to the point of where I might focus on something else entirely. This plan hasn't quite come to fruition yet because I'm still trying to get over my insecurities with recording. You would figure that, with how long I've done Let's Plays, I would feel as comfortable as I do. And that's not really the case either because I have this problem where I have a tendency to like misenunciate things or trip over my words, and I am the biggest pleb when it comes to that because I've had a tendency to redo videos that I really shouldn't because of these little issues, and it's like I wish a part of me would just tell myself to stop doing that, but it's like what can you really do besides like seek some kind of help? I know this sounds a bit personal, but what I'm trying to say is that if I can get over like these problems I have in overcoming this on a consistent basis, because it feels like I'm never consistent with anything. Uh, I'd like to try to add more different like variety and content and stuff. Like, Let's Plays were the big reason I moved channels in the first place 5 years ago, but, like, it just kind of sucks that I got a hold of, like, all of this equipment, like, a bit too late in the Let's Playing, like, history, I guess. I don't really know. Alright, so not much left to get in the wrecked ship, honestly. We're gonna be out of here within, like, the 10-minute mark, I would assume. So, yeah, I don't really mind the wrecked ship. It does its job, and I'm glad it's kind of short, really, because, like, you know, with a wrecked ship, there's not really a whole lot you can do, I feel like, in terms of making it artificially bigger. Uh, and I feel like the whole central hub behind it all, just like the way it all interconnects. There's just, I don't know. It's like Super Metroid knew there wasn't a whole lot you can do with the wrecked ship to make it stand out from Brinstar, Norfair, and Maridia. Besides, oh, look at me, my power came out from this big alien thing known as Fantoon, and when Fantoon got blown up, the power is suddenly back. It's just kind of there for the storytelling element thing, really. There to add to the horror, I suppose. And I guess if I did mention in one of the previous parts that Super Metroid was never really revolved around horror at first until this point, I guess you could say, like in Metroid 1 and 2, like I don't really consider like much in terms of horror. Like Metroid 2 definitely built up an atmosphere and suspension better than its predecessor did, but I wouldn't necessarily call it horror either. It was more like tension and just creepiness, you know? There was something creepy about like seeing these like Metroid infested areas and like just knowing that it's their territory and shit, you know, especially getting down to where the Omega Metroids were at. Um, but I never really thought like the series really delved straight up into horror until this point, where you have things that actually could potentially scare younger players at the time, you know. Because from what I'm gathering, like the whole gimmick behind, like, you know, outside of the power being restored and its element and storytelling for the Rex ship, is that it's mostly just a lot of like looking around, finding hidden blocks, and mm, I will admit, uh, playing Super Metroid compared to its sequels, I definitely find that some things are a bit too hidden for their own good. One example that I didn't happen to bring up going into Kraid's Lair is just how you get into the place from the get-go. Like, the reason I didn't bring this up or, like, complain about it was because I already knew about it from watching my cousin play the game. So, there wasn't that element of me getting lost, but every other instance after was indeed me playing through the game blind. Like, thankfully, when I played Super Metroid for the very first time, I didn't have, like, a guide like I did with Metroid 1 or 2. I played Super Metroid, like, legitimately. You know, I had to, like, figure everything out straight up to, like, the point of where you go through Maridia. And Maridia is what I consider, like, the hardest part of the whole game, because Maridia is freaking huge! Like, it's so easy to get lost in there, and, you know, overcoming Maridia after spending such an eternity there growing up was one of my biggest accomplishments, I feel like. That and beating Ridley, because Ridley kicked my ass so much playing Super Metroid for the first time. Uh, yeah, it's like, going back to the Kraid argument, like, how the hell was I supposed to know? Like, okay, so you got the super missiles recently, right? So you assume like right offhand that you can use the super missile to open up a few areas. And you know, the game did a pretty good job teaching you that, because after fighting Spore Spawn, there's at least two or three instances of using super missiles to unlock stuff. And then you get to Kraid's lair, and like the first problem is that the room is in an elevator shaft room, and it's weird to me. It's weird because like I don't have a problem bombing stuff, because the game kind of expects you to do that anyway right from the get-go. The game pretty heavily emphasized how much you were going to be using morph ball bombs just from them being the first major barrier in the game alone. But like for it being in an elevator shaft with pretty much no given indication and using the super missile to blow up those blocks, like what? Some of the expansion locations are a bit out there too. Like I don't like the expansion locations where you have like these random rooms and then all of a sudden you're shooting in the wall and then suddenly an expansion appears. Like I feel like Super Metroid is a lot more guilty of that than, you know, Fusion and Zero Mission were. Hell, even compared to Metroid 2 somewhat, now that I think about it. I mean, Metroid 2 has its own, like, problem of, like, bullshit expansion locations, but they were only, like, 3 instances of it. Super Metroid has that case everywhere, and I get that you have the X-ray scope. But it's like, some of the locations, like, for example, like, you're coming from Norfair, you're going down to the room where Karakamire is, and you find a room where they want you to use the power bombs to blow open the floor below because they made it super obvious. Then you go to the next room and it's like a vertical shaft down. And it's got like these breakable blocks that have like these enemies on them, and you're expected to like freeze them. And then you shoot the wall and it's like, what? I don't know. Maybe that was intentional though, because maybe they did intend for the frozen enemies to be used as a stepping stone to the expansion, but like, I would have preferred for it not to be hidden in the wall though. That just seems really left field to me. Also, I got grabbed when I normally don't, but... What am I doing? So, hopefully from here on out, I don't take Super Metroid out of my SNES again, because I think from this point onwards, I'm basically going to be playing the game until completion. Not today, though, because I have work. Work is a biatch, but... Well, not really. I'd say my job's pretty good for the most part, but you get the idea. It's like, I don't have the free time you guys expect me to have. Like, leave me alone. Stop it. But we're gonna see if we can at least get the spring ball, though. That's a bit funky to get, I'll admit. But we're gonna try. We are most certainly gonna try. But another thing I guess like I have to nitpick about when it comes to Super Metroid, like keep in mind all of these criticisms I'm giving Super Metroid at the moment, I don't think they directly impact the gameplay. Like this stuff is mostly just preference for me. Like I definitely see Super Metroid as a contender for the best Metroid game. Like there's no doubt about that in my mind, but there's a reason why it's not my personal favorite. You see what I did there? There's a reason why I play Zero Mission over like over Super most of the time, but anywho, what I was about to say was that one thing that I know a lot of people love that I don't necessarily like all that much. What am I doing? Why am I not able to wall jump? Okay. Okay, that was a little bit weird. Okay, anywho, one of the reasons, rather, one of the biggest contributors over to why I play Zero Mission over Super Metroid, and sometimes Super, well, not Super, but Fusion as well. I've always liked the handling and Zero Mission over Super. I know the level design and Fusion isn't as good as like Super's on most occasions, and sometimes Zero Missions, but I've never really liked Samus's over floaty nature. Generally speaking, I guess this is coming from the Mega Man side in me. When I jump, I don't like to stay in the air for an eternity, and this applies to Metroid 2 and 1, by the way. I don't like to spend so much air time whenever I jump. It feels so much slower to jump in this game than it does moving. And when I say that, I mean significantly slower jumping, unless you're like run jumping, but you have to have like space for that, you know? And I get that you have more control of your velocity, like controlling your airspeed and momentum when you jump this way, you know, having this floaty nature. But I've always liked the way it was in Zero Mission, especially, because like in Zero Mission, like whenever Samus jumped, she basically jumped and it was like really tight. Like the controls felt a lot more tight to me because it felt so smooth, I guess, like being able to quickly jump from one platform to another. Whereas with Super Metroid's case, I jump from one platform and it usually takes me like 2 seconds or something to land to another. I mean, granted, I've gotten over most of this by now, seeing that I still play Super Metroid a lot, but like, it's little nuances like that. And of course, there's other like level design decisions as well that influence why I prefer Zero Mission over Super Metroid. Most notably in how much more flexible the game feels at times, being able to collect as bare minimum as possible before progressing to other areas, and just how the developers have like this intentional like design philosophy to create multiple options around different scenarios. And Super Metroid has that too, but there's something about the direction the developers went and their perspective in doing so that I appreciate a bit more. Like in their case, like the options that you pick might not necessarily be better, but these might be ways of challenging the player. Because they did design an ending around 10% after all. Oh no, it was 15%, my bad. And other things too, but like with Super Metroid, it definitely feels like, you know, for the most part, I definitely need a little bit more instill than you know, for what I would need in Zero Mission, I guess. Does that make any sense? I know I probably haven't thought this out the whole way through. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I like Metroid Zero Mission's like approach to like creating different options that get around different things for the player in Zero Mission than I do Super Metroid, which, you know, in hindsight, technically Super Metroid has more options. But those options tend to feel a bit more harder to execute, and either that or they take a much longer time to like do, you know? Like, yeah, the other options you take in Zero Mission definitely feel harder in some case, or more likely to not, less obvious anyway. But they don't require the shitload of execution it takes in, like it does in Super Metroid to execute. I know that's such a casual thing to say, and I'm probably going to regret my words after this video. It's like, I get it. Super Metroid is like the epitome of like hardcore like Metroid speedruns. But like, I don't know, like Zero Mission just has the pacing down a little bit better for me than Super Metroid does, I guess. I'll have more of a cohesive argument when we get to playing Zero Mission. But yeah, but Over that, though, it's mostly the controls, really. I know that's not an objective thing to say, but it's the controls and the handling that I prefer in Zero Mission more than I do in Super Metroid. There's a lot more of a tight control scheme in Zero Mission than there was in Super Metroid. Also, I'm talking about this for way longer than I need to, so next time on Let's Play Super Metroid, we're going to explore more of this gigantic area of Maridia. So that's going to be fun. See you guys then.